featured the Nazi eagle clutching a swastika. There were some dog-eared old art catalogues, some faded museum brochures, and in a single, unlabeled envelope 3 black-and-white photographic negatives, the old kind, each some 3 by 5 inches, of paintings that I didn't specifically recognize, but which appeared to be French Impressionist paintings. The stacks grew higher, and then higher still. The appearance of my father's papers gave no outward indication of secrets long concealed, no promise of dramatic revelations, certainly not life-changing ones. Yet, as we began to look more closely at them, to examine the details, certain things stood out. The art collection that we understood had once been owned by our father's parents, the grandparents we had never known, consisted of works by some of the greatest masters, old and new: Degas, Renoir, Botticelli, Memling, Cranach, Guardi. There were also inventories of priceless Renaissance sculptures in gold and silver, of valuable tapestries and Louis XV furniture, and then a photostat of an aged, wrinkled, handwritten note from my grandfather, describing the location of certain artworks and signed P for Papi. Curiously, and in retrospect ominously, amid those same documents, often on the same pages, were references to some of history's most infamous figures: Adolf Hitler, Reichsmarschall Hermann Göring, Heinrich Himmler, Martin Bormann, Nazi philosopher Alfred Rosenberg, and to the monument dedicated to themselves, the planned Führermuseum in the Austrian city of Linz and the Reichsmarschall's estate at Carinhal. Coupled with them were the names of men I did not then recognize, but who nonetheless somehow sounded sinister: Haberstock and Hofer, Bohler and Pleach and Miedel. Within those stacks of my father's papers, stacks already tipping over and starting to spread glacier-like across my brother's table, were references to Theresienstadt, the Nazis' model concentration camp, and to the death chambers of Auschwitz. There were allusions to the Nazi occupation of Holland, to the SS and the Gestapo, to the French resistance and the American World War II spy service, the OSS, to Scotland Yard and the International Police Agency, Interpol. Then came memorandums from various post-war restitution bureaus in West Germany, France, and Holland, followed by notations concerning corrupt Swiss art dealers, spies and collaborators, hordes of priceless art packed into Parisian warehouses and Austrian salt mines, and much more. The papers were confusing, mysterious, enigmatic. They were, I realized, very much like the man who had assembled them. He had not always been so. As a young boy growing up in post-war London, I remember my father as an open, loving man, perhaps a bit reserved in the British style, but not above expressions of affection. One of my earliest memories is of my father hoisting me up on his shoulders, probably painfully, I now realize, because of his war wounds, so that I could watch the funeral procession for King George VI, who had died a few days earlier on my 4th birthday. From that lofty perspective, it seemed to me that my father was enormously tall, which actually he was not, and terribly strong, which he was. I remember also that despite the solemnity of the occasion, played out under inevitably grey London skies, to me it had a magical quality: the plumed helmets of the lifeguards, the king's coffin draped in the royal standard, adorned with the crown jewels, and mounted on a gun carriage pulled by a clip-clopping team of Windsor greys. The rank upon rigid rank of marching soldiers and funereally paced cavalry came from every far-flung country of what had once been the British Empire. For a small boy, seeing the coffin of the wartime king, the last emperor of India, there was no sense of the war's tragedy, no feeling of loss of lives, of treasure, of innocence. It was all simply glorious. The war was never far away in the physical sense. Against our parents' stern admonitions, Nick and I could not resist exploring the countless bomb sites that still scarred London even a decade after the peace, dressing up in 2 large war-surplus uniforms and balancing wobbly Tommy helmets on our 2 small heads. Every Thursday I would race to the newsagent stand in the South Kensington tube station to buy the latest installment of the War Picture Library, a comic book series featuring the